Craig came to the OTA from Microsoft, where he handled security and privacy issues. Please welcome Craig in our first panel.
Thanks for the introduction, and Steve, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As we're getting settled here, oh, that side, okay. Excuse me here. So trust is actually a key theme, and I think it's really important that we address that. But before we talk about that, I'd like to, we designed this panel to provide a 360-degree view of the issues. And the session's who's controlling the ad experience. And I'd like to say, really, it's really the user experience that we should be talking about. But maybe if each one of you could just give a quick 30-second background of who you are and why you care about this issue would be great, and then we can jump into some great hard questions.
Sure, thanks, Craig. Good morning. I'm Joe Barone from Group M Connect, and my foot is caught in the wire. We care about it because we believe that what's good for consumers is good for marketers, and we do everything we can to provide a good advertising experience in the digital marketplace. I also care about it because I do a lot of you mean to tell me meetings. You mean to tell me meetings are meetings we have with clients where they start by saying, you mean to tell me that 30% of my ads are never seen? Or you mean to tell me that I'm advertising to bots? Or you mean to tell me that 15% of the target that I'm trying to reach doesn't want any advertising at all? And sometimes we have to tell them things like that and explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. And trying to do it better all the time is what we do.
Great.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm John Reed. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Wonderman, and I'm based here in D.C. I know this is important to me because I make the ads that we serve up, so it's important to me to understand behaviors and provide value to customers and as they kind of make their way through and kind of give them a way to kind of care about the things that we make for my clients.
Hey guys, good morning. I'm Alex Cattell, the founder and CEO of Independent Journal. This is important to me because we support around 60 journalists based here in DC and around the country who are covering news, politics, current events. We have a reporter in the White House briefing room. We're following the campaigns, and so programmatic advertising is an important piece of the puzzle for a small publisher who's just emerging on the scene, building a brand. And so this stuff's definitely important to us.
Hey guys, my name is Ben Williams. I am the operations director at AdBlock Plus, and we're based in Cologne, Germany. And I guess this is important to me because, well, I work at the biggest ad blocker, so this kind of has to be important to me. But it's really important to us at AdBlock Plus because we are looking for ways to encourage better advertising, and we think that that's a place where everybody basically wants to go.
Great. Hey, before we get started, I think it'd be maybe interesting, by a raise of hands, how many here use an ad blocker? Interesting. The rest of them I don't think are telling the truth, though, right there? But, one of the questions that really comes down to, I'd like to start off is, from your individual perspective, why do you think consumers are blocking ads today? What is the problem? And I'll suggest, is the problem the ad blockers, or is it the problem consumers and the distrust of ads? So, John? Go, Joe. I'm sorry.
That's okay. If you're starting with me, no problem. I think that nature abhors a vacuum, and the marketplace commands development. So if there's a need for a tool, that tool will be developed. And that, it's true in biology and evolution, and certainly true in technology. So the fact that there are consumers who are looking for that level of control naturally leads to the opportunity for someone to create that control for them. The real question is, can we do a good enough job of listening to understand why consumers are exhibiting this behavior, and what do consumers really want? Do they really want less advertising? Do they really want more relevant advertising? Or do they really just want advertising that isn't annoying and shouts out while they're trying to watch something on the train or at work? So I think it's pretty understandable that ad blocking exists and that it's gaining traction.
So if you're the categories that that have come up, it sounds like Jeopardy. The categories, people mention security, privacy, user the experience, the annoyance factor. What would you say the top
Data
one?
usage is another one.
Data.
It's interesting. It's hard to say what the top one is. I think different people do it for different reasons. The SKUs are certainly younger, more professional, IT professional. So I think more and more, I think it started as these annoying ads, and there's also the tremendous growth of user-generated content has led consumers to a feeling that the quid pro quo of pay-for-play professional content is not always why they go to the web. So if you're in a personal environment, if you're tweeting with friends, or if you're posting on your Facebook page the pictures of your vacation, why should that be interrupted by an ad from Dove soap? And there's good reasons why it is interrupted, obviously, because that Facebook tool or that Twitter feed is free to you, but it isn't a sort of, it isn't part of the value exchange evaluation in the mind of a lot of users.
So, John, you create a lot of the ads. You kind of represent the brand marketer. What's your thoughts here?
For me, I think it's about relevance. David Ogilvy has this quote that I love. This quote from the 50s, and it's as relevant then as it is today. But people don't read advertising; they read what interests them. And I think that I want to create pieces that are interesting to the people that are there. I want to catch them. I want to learn as much as I can about them and serve them up something of value or interest. I mean, the old days of spamming. I think back to the 90s or so when banner ads were like these flashing red and yellow things that no one wanted, and they were an eyesore. So kind of started off on the wrong foot. I feel like as we've evolved over time and leveraged data to serve up things that are relevant, I think the experience has gotten a lot better.
Great. Alex, from the publisher's perspective, I think it's really important, a small publisher, because there's millions of sites out there. How is this impacting you, and what is your view of the reason your visitors are using a blocker, or are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason is pretty clear. It's a much better experience. Anyone that's downloaded and used an ad blocker, I think it'd be tough to make a case why you should ever go back to viewing ads. The sites load faster. There's less distractions. It's a better experience all around. And I think part of the challenge for publishers and consumers is it's always been an implicit value exchange. We just assume as publishers that everyone's agreed to see ads in order to view the content. And I think that's a tough case to make for most consumers because they never agreed to that. And so they feel like it's okay to block ads because they never agreed to that value exchange. I think what you're seeing now from sites like Forbes, and I know we're going to talk about it later, but is when you explicitly ask to either pay for the content or view ads or go away, people view the ads. And I think we're going to see that more and more happen with publishers. And I think we're just at the very beginning of a transition to explicit inclusion of advertising in your experience or paid content.
Great. Do you have any data on users on your site and what?
Yeah, so we're a lot of our traffic's mobile, and with ad blockers, mobile hasn't really taken off yet. Although it certainly will. It's just like desktop; it's a better experience, and there's no downside for anyone to download it. So people are, and they're telling other people about it. So I think for us, we're seeing about a 10% ad blocking on our site.
Great. And Ben, I'm sure you have some perspectives from the consumer side.
Sure. Well, I mean, all too often I think that ad blocking gets described as a symptom of bad ads. And I don't like that description because a symptom to me sounds involuntary. It sounds like a sneeze. But I think it's a very active thing that people do. They go out and they install an ad blocker on their devices, usually up to this point on browsers. And so I think it's a statement of dissatisfaction. They're saying that we demand something better. And where we come up at it as an ad blocker is a bit different, I think, than where most other ad blockers have come at it up to this point, because ad blocking developed as a blanket thing. It was blocking all the things. What we've done, and we're still working out the kinks in this, we started it in 2011, is what we call acceptable ads. And I know we may get to that later, but it's basically a set of criteria. If you come to us as a publisher or as an ad network and the ads that you serve fit those criteria that we generated with our users after we surveyed them, after we talked to them on forums, and so on and so forth, then your ads can be whitelisted and users can see those ads. And I know it sounds crazy that the ad blocker is encouraging ads, but I think that that is a way we can go positively forward. And the only metric I think that matters on acceptable ads is the opt-out rate. And it's about 5 to 8%. So what we found is that even a very picky ad blocker is okay with seeing some ads, but you have to advertise to that person on their own terms. And that's, I think, a key point where we were talking about, this implicit value exchange. I think that that's very true. I mean, I remember how like the morning paper smelled when I woke up on Sunday morning. Like I actually remember papers, and I remember seeing the ads in the papers. And I asked my dad, why are there's a half-naked woman, around the editorial section? And he was like, well, that's an ad that pays for the content. And I remember that, but I do think that there's a generation coming up that don't remember papers whatsoever. And that's the issue, is we're going to have to not just, and what they did grow up with is ad blockers. So we're going to have to advertise to them on their own terms. And yeah, the final thing is just, I agree, we're also in a state of transition. We're figuring things out right now.
Great. Alex, you mentioned the Forbes recent test, I guess. Maybe do you want to provide an overview of that, or?
Sure, yeah. So anyone that goes to Forbes.com now that has a ad blocker installed, you'll be asked to either enable or I guess disable your ad blocker for an ad light experience or leave and go find the content elsewhere or just deal with not being able to get that information. And I think that's a really fair tactic used by Forbes. And I know there's been some blowback because people that enabled the ads on Forbes and malware. Part of the challenge is programmatically ads. Forbes isn't picking every advertiser that comes on their site. It's the ad network itself that is linking them with the advertisers. And so I think to blame Forbes, yeah, they're partly responsible, but I think there's a bigger challenge with the ad networks for allowing malware advertisers on their platforms. And I think beyond that, somehow justify surveying the Forbes message, because there's malware is sort of like saying, well, I'm not going to pay to shop at Target anymore because my credit card, because 40 million credit cards got stolen. I think you're asking someone to pay for something that has value, and if they agree that they will consume that information, consume that content that has value, then they have to either enable those ads or pay for the content or leave.
Right. So, I think it's we talked before and we started, and Joe, you mentioned we're about ready to have into an arms race. And effectively, I think we're at an arms race already. I do applaud Forbes' approach there. I think that is a good opportunity and to communicate the value proposition, which I think, some have suggested the industry has failed to really articulate that value proposition back to the consumer. I am concerned about the malvertising. Those of you may know, I've testified on the Hill here, and IAB and others, Google and Yahoo have kind of dismissed malvertising as being a problem, but I think it's a growing problem that needs to be addressed here. But, looking at the, what Forbes did, that's great for a big site, but what can, other publishers do, or what should they do? So do you guys have any other opinions of that type of approach to intercept that web session and redirect? Is that a good approach, or?
Craig, if you don't mind if I jump in, there is this sort of generally held belief that if you're a big enough site, you can do something like that, and for an independent site, it might be harder. But I think we really have to examine that model. We're in DC. Think about things like net neutrality. You can spin that Forbes model on its head and say, if you have the money to pay, we won't annoy you. And if you don't have the money to pay and you want to see our content, we're going to annoy the hell out of you, and we're going to collect your data, and we're going to drain your battery. And I'm not sure if setting up a two-tiered system of access to premium content is an approach that's going to play well publicly. We live in a world of unintended consequences. Everything we've ever done has never been intended, for the most part, premium advertisers, premium marketers, we never intended to piss anybody off, right? We're trying to effectively communicate to our favorite people, the people that buy our products. And our unintended consequences of our overexuberance is that sometimes we annoy people. I made the mistake of buying an Orvis sweatshirt, no offense to Orvis, and they followed me for a month. I bought the sweatshirt already. Stop showing it to me. I already bought it. So the things we do, the unintended consequences of what we do are our worst enemies. And I think if you think about something like the Forbes experiment from a net neutrality standpoint, I'm not sure if it holds water.
I just have to push back on that. I think what we have
That's what makes these fun.
Yeah, I think what we have to decide is, do we think that journalism has value? And if we think it should just be given away for free, then, maybe we just need more billionaires to buy newspapers and call it a day and just have it
No,
be
Alex, I agree with that. And I think the hard thing is there's so much content available. If you say no, people can go somewhere else. And also,
And I agree, that is a big challenge, is
Yeah.
the attribution problem. If you break a story, there's literally no value that's derived from original reporting, because
How many
everyone
people
can-
here think their internet is free? Do you pay for your iPad? Do you pay for your cell phone? Do you pay for your cell phone service? So the free internet is a really difficult argument. You didn't get paid, I get that, but Verizon got paid and Apple got paid and, whoever else got paid.
So I think publishers should
users-
have the right to be able
Yeah.
to charge for content.
So let me,
It's just a hard argument to make because it isn't free. Who's got free internet here?
So,
Well, in the hotel.
I agree with you, though. You're right.
So let's kind of,
you're right.
redirect a little bit here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that net neutrality argument, it sounds like that's a great thing from a lobbying perspective, and no disrespect there. But reality is, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, it's out there today. Subscription models succeed and exist. But go ahead, John.
I think that there's some other brands too that you'll give permission to do that too. And to me, the challenge with the Forbes thing is it's Forbes, right? If it was something more like the World Wildlife Foundation or something I'm passionate and care about, I would do that and want to donate to it and get the ads because it's supporting something that I love and care about. I think bigger news outlets aren't necessarily in my ethos that way, and I don't know. It just feels like a weird argument to, like the Hearst Corporation. You really want to give them more money? It's one of those. No offense if you're in the room, but one of those things, I just feel like you need the right tool for the right job, and that felt a little off-brand.
But shouldn't
for
the
Forbes
publishers
to me.
have that right? I mean, they're spending
They
all that money.
absolutely should. They absolutely should. But that doesn't mean I have to allow them to do that for me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's-
it tarnished their brand for me a little
And
bit.
to your point too, that is going to be the challenge, is people are not accustomed to paying for content, and right now there's enough ability where if you find a story that's interesting and compelling that was originally reported on Forbes, I can just type into Google search the headline of the story and find it in 15 other places.
a bit more work for you, but it's, click
You
or
go
two
to
ways
Media
over.
Post and find that's what you're saying, right? So, it's interesting different models here. There's also technologies, people are coming out, anti-ad blocker blockers, and approaches there. And I'm not sure at the end of the day that's a race to the bottom or if that's one we can win in. But more importantly, what can we do about the problems? So, I like to suggest that ad blockers aren't the problem. It's consumers' distrust, tying back to Steve's comment, or disdain maybe is a better word.
I think it's also about the content creators. Speaking for myself and what I do for a living, I strive to make better content that they don't want to turn off. We're talking about malware and a lot of these kind of spammy things that aren't really providing value, and I think the challenge is creating something that consumers want to engage with. Whether it's branded content or an ad that gives you an offer. I mean, I thoroughly believe that you have to give to get in the digital world. You can't just assume that you're going to put out stuff and people are going to engage with you. So whether it's, a value exchange of an idea, a thought, a coupon, whatever it is, you need to give them something to engage with your brand. And I don't think there's enough of that going on. I think there's a lot of spammy kind of, flash here and buy it now, like the Orvis, or creepy Orwellian, like I'm going to follow you. Like, you don't get me at all. It actually works against the Orvis brand, right?
Right.
So.
Yeah, ad targeting.
Yeah.
The ads don't stop. And of course, I'm not sure. So so who's responsible? We have creative. We have agencies. We have publishers here. There's probably another 5 or 6 stakeholders in different segments. How can we fix the problems? And whose job is it to do it?
I'm looking down at this end.
Clearly, ad blockers.
They're not going to fix the problem. They just mask it. One might suggest, right?
No, I mean, you know, I talked about what we were doing in this space earlier, but I think it's going to take perhaps a sea change, perhaps very creative thinking. But we are in D.C., and we are mainly Americans here. When we want something changed, we usually do it very quickly. So I tend to look at this fairly optimistically. And I don't want to open up a new can of worms here, but there also is the idea of funding content in other ways. We've actually got some really nice experiments underway where you can directly fund content that you like. Models like that, while they may reduce the amount of ads, will increase the amount of money you can make off those ads. And it will also, if you're a brand, it's going to increase the amount of interaction you get with customers. Because, you know, let's face it, you can have 10 million page views or ad views, and that may mean nothing. But if you have one person who clicks on an ad and they really like it and it's really engaging, then that's got to be worth more than just 10 million people who ignored it as they read the content. So, you know, I wouldn't suggest any one thing in particular, but I think I want to hit on this transitionary period that we're on right now. I think that we're transitioning onto something new, and we should look at ad blocking as an opportunity for innovation, an opportunity to talk to ad blockers, perhaps through people like us, to see what they will find valuable. And if we can find ads that people find value in, then we're all in a better place.
So Joe, 21 years ago, you were working at Hotwire, and the first banner ad. So you can actually, one might say you created the advertising industry, right? But you know, seriously, you know, you look at the innovation that we've achieved. It's been tremendous. Interest-based advertising provides a lot of value and relevancy. But now the point is, have we stepped over the edge? And how do we pull back, or do we pull back?
Well, I think, the market economy says that what's good for consumers is good for marketers, and I think only consumers will determine what we do moving forward, because if the bad behavior pays out, marketers will continue to do the bad behavior. If bad behavior stops paying out because people stop listening or reward those who behave responsibly, then you will see more responsible behavior. Because we know in our minds that it's right to behave responsibly, but if you can make money the other way, there are those that will. And unfortunately, the industry is held to the standard of the worst behavior. So if 2% of the marketing industry does belly fat ads and flashes red and green and, you know, turns the volume on loud and drains your battery, then the headlines are going to be about that 2%. So the industry will always appear as if it's much more prevalent than it really is. So the consumer will decide which tactics are going to be the most valuable for marketers.
Well, is there not a role for effectively the ad exchanges and the ad networks to really say we won't accept those ads and to take a definitive line, or is it the publishers saying I don't want those ads to run on my platform? I mean, it's going to take someone in the ecosystem to make that stance, I think. Alex, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think ad networks need to police their networks. I can't tell you how many times we're forced to police their own network, and some of these ads now, they're terrible. I mean, the ones you have on mobile where it auto redirects to the App Store, and next thing you know, you're downloading Clash of Clans. I mean, that's insane. Those have to stop. And the network should not allow those ads to run.
So, you know, there's industry working groups that have done some good work in certain areas, but it doesn't seem, and they're forming new working groups and things. I mean, these things continue to go. This is not a new discussion. Do we need regulation in this area?
I think they should they should self-regulate, hopefully. You know, if someone is a bad actor in one of these networks, if they're loading malware, they're redirecting towards the App Store, it should be a 1 or 2 strike policy, and you're suspended 6-12 months as an advertiser the second you try and run one of those ads. And you know, 3 strikes, you're off the network for good. There should be policies in place that don't allow these ads that are universally hated, from publishers, consumers, ad networks, you name it. There should be policies in place that the bad actors, they get kicked off.
Anyone else want to comment on that, or don't want to touch that one? I think one of the challenges is there's so many ad networks, so I can jump from one to another. And the other challenge is the ad exchange, the real-time programmatic buying, the way it's so dynamic. I've suggested that there be a model like the airports where you have a pre-line, and those are the trusted advertisers go through that, and there's no vetting and there's no friction. And that's your 99% of your ads. And the questionable or the new advertisers and such, they go through the strip search line effectively and have that vetting. So again, we have a very efficient advertising supply chain and ecosystem that we can't break it. We can't change the engines mid-flight here. So that's one idea. What other ideas others might have to help solve the problems?
I think the challenge is the bespoke nature of that. I mean, you need to have someone strip searching in that secondary line, and I just think that there aren't the bodies to actually look at every single piece of advertising. I mean, the internet's a big wild place, right? I think it's hard to regulate. I agree with you that we should, but I don't know the answer because there's just so much content out there these days. And no one likes remnant inventory. They're going to fill the hole. Someone said earlier, nature hates a vacuum, and that's exactly true for the web. If there's a space, they're going to put up something even if it's not the best content.
By the way, I'm happy to take any questions from the audience if someone has one here. Ben, there's been a lot of argument on, of how you're interrupting the flow of commerce for sites and things, or how ad blockers are doing that. A lot of approaches of how to define what's an acceptable ad, and that's somewhat a controversial topic, as you and I have had, I think, agreed to disagree on certain parts of that. But trying to say, is there a solution, and maybe your insights on what we can do to help make it a win-win? Is there a win-win, I guess?
Well, probably it's going to take some time. I think that we tried to establish criteria with and for our users, and we did that by polling them and by conducting tests and surveys and that sort of thing. But we were only able really to tackle format. That was the easiest thing and the most tangible thing that we could tackle for Acceptable Ads 1.0.
And that's primary search.
Well, no. You can do display advertising, you can do image ads, that's fine too. But I think that the bigger challenge is for us to take a step away from that, because while we started something that we think is good, we want that to be able to scale to other ad blockers, and we want to take a step away from that, so that we sort of create a firewall between our interests and what these criteria might be. And so we do have this idea about, that we kind of talked about before, about establishing an independent committee. So essentially there would be a foundation. That foundation would own these criteria, and there would be a committee made up of people from all over the ads landscape. So anyone from a publisher to a consumer-facing group to a nonprofit like the Electronic Frontiers Foundation or someone like that, or the OTA, Craig. But yeah, so that would be our idea of how we can establish better ads for people who already block ads.
Great. And I should, by the way, point out that there's the electronic EFF, Electronic Frontier Foundation. They've come up with a model, and basically it's if a publisher or network supports and embraces do not track, they would give them a white list. So there's multiple solutions out there. I'm not sure the uptake on that, but again, that's trying to really address the privacy and the data collection, and really to fill the void of the opt-out model that's current, cookie-based model that's out there today. So that's another approach, trying to address the privacy issues. There's a whole other dimension, I'm not sure if anyone on the panel is more and more corporations are blocking ads outright. And unfortunately, this is behind the firewall, so it's not necessarily visible. But the reasons there are basically on the privacy and security side. So I think all these areas are really important. I think, Joe, you're on a committee with Lean, or Lean, I should say Lean. Where is that going? Is that going to really provide a solution, and is that open enough to have the right people at the table, or is that just an inner circle?
I just want to make sure I get the acronym right. I think it is open enough, and it's an IAB working group, or an IAB managed working group, and the acronym stands for Light Encrypted Ad Choices Non-Invasive advertising. So basically, while it makes sense that you don't want necessarily a trade association that represents sellers managing this process, right? Because you could have the perspective that the things that sellers do are the problem, but sellers can't sell if buyers don't buy. And it doesn't make sense if consumers don't follow through. So everybody is responsible. So I think it's appropriate that you get a large group of sellers to sign up for responsible behavior, and that's exactly what the Lean program is. And part of the Lean program is exactly very much, Alex, what Forbes is doing, and they call it DNCC, which is detect, notify, choice, and constrain. So first, the most important thing for publishers is to know whether or not somebody has an ad blocker. So building the detection technology, and they've released code now to allow publishers to detect ad blockers. And then you try to have a conversation with your user and try to explain to them why you do what you do. And maybe that language is difficult because people don't believe that the internet is free, but maybe they don't understand that Forbes or the Independent Journal or Yahoo is not getting paid directly by the user for the content that they're providing. So I think Lean has a lot of opportunity to make positive headway. And we have to decide whether we want to focus on slowing down the adoption of ad blockers, or do we want to engage with those who've already employed ad blockers to try to bring them back into the fold?
Well, great. Well, it's interesting. Past industry efforts, such as the Ad Integrity Alliance, failed because, again, couldn't get a consensus and agreement. And a lot of the same stakeholders in that same group now with IAB. What's missing from there is this voice of the consumer. And I think that's one of the things that we have to look at and be willing to make changes. It is a very complex. And so I know we talked earlier, what's the consumer really want and what's that consumer experience? And it's not just about, telling them that, why they should, turn off their blocker. On the performance side, so I want to drill down on the performance side. The videos and the audios are constantly running on a window that you're not looking at. What can be done on that? And from a creative side, I imagine that's why I'm looking at you. Your customers want that, right? They want the videos and the music playing and the voiceovers, right?
It's interesting. I think one of the best ads that came out last year, I thought it was genius. And it's rare. I've been at this game a long time. I like to tell people I've been at it since the turn of the century, I got one little laugh. You guys are a hard crowd this morning. But it's funny. It's rare when you see stuff that really blows your mind, but I think the Martin Agency did some great work this last year for Geico. I'm not sure if you guys have seen them, but streaming pre-roll, as everyone knows, you go to YouTube or you go to Hulu and you actually want to see what you went there to watch. And there's always a stream pre-roll, and you wait till the thing pops up and says skip ad. They did these really genius ads for Geico where it was called the unskippable ad, but the best part was it was really skippable. But it was, like a family at a table, and it would pause, and it would just sit, and they would actually move. It'd be real video, but it looked like it had paused. And I wish I could tell you guys the stats, but people actually really love those ads because they wanted to see the dog come in and eat the spaghetti when the actors are all frozen. I think that is innovative and interesting. And it's a great way that a creative group did an ad for Geico and made the ad more relevant. Well, I don't know about relevant, but more interesting to them. They actually wanted to watch it. It turned into content. So I'm always looking for interesting things like that online, especially when it comes to video and all that.
And I think it all comes back to, I think, powerful ads and a powerful driver is curiosity. We're seeing that with a lot of news sites now playing into the curiosity gap on social media. But even from an advertising angle, when you look at offers or how the Wall Street Journal puts up their paywall, they've had much better results by previewing part of the article, the first 2 paragraphs, and getting you hooked in, getting you curious, the tease. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in advertising, where you're drawing someone in, you're making them curious about a subject that you already care about, and you're self-selecting that you're interested in more information because you are so curious about this offer.
Can a small publisher implement a solution like the Journal has there?
I don't know. I think it'd be tough. I think it's going to take kind of an effort from a lot of different publishers coming together and deciding that, especially around ad-blocked content, we should have a solution that we all agree on, whether it's paid or an ad-light experience. But I think it'd be really tough for smaller publishers. And I think it's even going to be tough for some of the bigger brands over the next 5-10 years. When you look at how our generation consumes news and who we trust individuals more than institutions. And we're able now with Twitter and even Facebook to some extent to follow journalists directly. And the idea that you subscribe to a masthead that just has a series of journalists, you maybe only like 5% of them, seems a little bit bizarre. So I think you'll start to see a shift in the perception. And I kind of think the news industry today looks a lot like the music industry 10 years ago when you had Napster that really dominated. It was a blunt force instrument that forced change in an industry. I think AdBlock Plus is a lot like that. It was a blunt force instrument that forced change. Granted, they've done a lot of smart things. I think the acceptable ads policy allows them to navigate more effectively changing ecosystem, but ultimately it's going to be really tough. I think even when you look at AdBlock Plus, when Chrome and Firefox and Safari and all these browsers decide to have their own AdBlock experience and control that process and build the standards, I think they're in some way allowing some of the early market leaders to navigate the space for them before they dive in.
Great. We're going to have to wrap up here. So I do have one last question. And it's a two-part question. What can we each do today? And by today, it's like the next month, next 90 days. And then where will we be a year from now? Will we be having the same conversation, the same dialogue, saying, yeah, the user needs to have more control and, and we aren't doing enough. So Ben, we'll start that side there, Ben. So where are we going to be a year from now and what can we do today?
Well, we're going to be done with our committee, so maybe some of you would be interested in joining. A little plug there. I don't get a chance to advertise very much, that's the thing.
We just blocked that.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's going to be really exciting. I actually agree with a lot of what you were just saying, though, and a lot of what we've been hearing in the last little bit. It is about user volition. Like if a user chooses to engage with something, then or if you create an ad or if you create content, if you're a journalist, that's good enough. A user is going to choose to pay for that content, perhaps support you in some other way. If it's an advertisement and it doesn't pop out at you immediately, but says, hey, you might be interested in this, gives you, say, the ad version of the 2-paragraph teaser, then you click on it. Then it can be as creative and loud and crazy as it wants to be. We've actually found that ad blockers spend a lot of money online. It was a German consulting firm, and they found that your typical ad blocker, young, tech-savvy, educated, that person also spends a lot of money online. So they're not cheap. They're a very, very interesting group to get in touch with. So I think that a year from now we may be closer to where the music industry is today, which is a lot better place. I think it's much less dependent upon big record labels. It's much more dependent on sort of artists. And what you've seen is more creativity, more artists who are able to make some money. They don't have to make their entire salary, but they can make some money off of their art. And I think that's a very interesting direction that we could go in with online advertising.
Great. Alex?
I think that I think mobile adoption is going to increase, and it'll be interesting to see how the big guys factor that into their own products. And you're seeing now Google has AMP, which is an experience that will allow for ads, but will solve a lot of the challenges around privacy and performance. And Facebook has instant articles where you can stay within the app. You don't have to click through to a website. So I think those will start to be more and more mainstream adopted. And you're seeing it now in your news feed. If you scroll down, I'd say at least 40% of the news articles I see have the little lightning bolt symbol next to it. And they're clearly now weighting their instant articles more heavily into the feed. So I think what we'll see is, I think most of the changes will happen around mobile, and it'll be interesting to see how the big players push their products, whether it's AMP or instant articles, over the next year.
For me, I think it's all about the data. I think it used to be about data collection. It's not about that anymore. It's about data and intelligence. Back in the old days, if you think about it, a small town, maybe Cologne, Germany, you have the town square and you have a guy on a soapbox broadcasting out the message. It's no longer about that. I think it's about reaching down and having a one-to-one communication with the people you're trying to sell to, you know, and being really relevant, using the data to be really relevant to each person individually, because what works for Bob doesn't work for Sally, doesn't work for Sue. But relevance will build trust. And over time, trust will build commitment to your brand. So,
It's great going last because you hear what everybody else said. I agree with trust and relevance, and of course, the other buzzword for the year, Kenneth, might be transparency. And I also believe that it's going to happen mostly in mobile and in-app. So where the industry goes will be determined by the in-app environment. And I think that a year is not enough for us all to align on a particular behavior because we've seen before that we can't do anything in a year. But I think that there will be a continued development of new opportunities. You know, display and video advertising is already a relatively small percentage of the total marketing communications, digital marketing communications investment of most of our clients. So we'll see a continued shifting of dollars into tactics that are either less intrusive or more intrusive.
Great. Well, actually, I'm the last one, so I'll give my. I think we're going to see ad blocking explode, and it's going to go beyond the techie audience, the first audiences, as people hear about the perceived privacy issue as they go to mobile and the performance and their data plans get consumed. So we're going to see that a driver short term. My hope is that we reach an inflection point very quickly, and I don't think we can afford another year of having these discussions because these are not new discussions. My hope is the publishers stand up, and the publishers have the ability, if they can get together and say, we won't accept these ads, they have to force back. So that's my perception, and that's my wish, I would say, because we're in this together, and advertising provides a tremendous amount of value to consumers. There's a tremendous amount of content out there, and we want to see that grow and prosper. But we can't continually form another committee to look at the problem and not be willing to address and make the hard decisions today. So I want to thank the panel for some great insights, jumping on a tough topic, and I know we have different points of view here. So again, thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Craig. We have questions. If anybody has any questions of the panel. Yep. Please, when you have a question, stand, tell us who you are and who you're with.
Hi, Nate Carter with Media Associates. One question I have, because I know, at least to my knowledge, it's a little unclear. Does AdBlock accept money from advertisers in exchange for whitelisting? I know there is talk about Google, Microsoft, and if so, how does that sort of inhibit your ability to be neutral in this discussion?
It's not as easy as just accepting money. First of all, everyone has to abide by criteria, but what happens is we charge a licensing fee for the very top 10% of the people on the list. But the subcurrent to your question is absolutely right. It is fraught with danger because at some point that could cause us to throw away the criteria and just accept the highest bidder. Now, we've always had the inhibitor of our users. If there are other free ad blockers out there that don't have a whitelist. So had we ever, sort of thrown the criteria out the window and just put a big flash banner up, people would have probably just left AdBlock Plus in droves and gone to AdBlock, for instance. But we want to put an even bigger firewall. We want to put a huge wall between that part, which is just implementing the whitelist, and what the criteria are for getting on the whitelist. And that's precisely why we are starting this, or one of the reasons why we're starting this independent committee.
Next, we have...
Sure. My name is Matthew Virtue. I'm with Pinsight Media. You guys mentioned data. Like, what type of data are you looking for, and how is that going to affect who you actually serve your ads to make them more relevant to the people who are seeing them? Because I think half of the problem actually half of the problem is that we're getting ads, bombarded with ads that we really don't care about. So if we can use data to figure out not what I want, but what anticipating what I want, Is that not a way to actually circumvent the whole ad blocking thing? Because if you're blocking ads, you're blocking ads. We're going to lose that person anyway, right?
Yeah, the scary thing is that we try that every day. We're trying to do that every day, and still advertising is creepy and annoying and doesn't seem to be targeted. But that's exactly what we do. We use targeting data, behavioral data. We use as much data as we can to try to deliver a more relevant message at the point where you're ready to buy, because those are our best consumers. It's incredibly difficult to do it well.
Here's a question for you. If you had got that Orvis sweater and it said, hey, we know you bought the blue one, but you want the green one, would that have been creepy or would that have been cool?
Yes.
And get it at 20% off. Would you have bought another one at 20% off, right?
It would have got a 5%
It's all the approach, right? So.
Well, that's a good point, the retargeting challenge, and it's
Meanwhile,
great.
Orvis paid me to
Or they had a
represent them tonight, so this is how you get around ad blocking.
Or they superimposed your head wearing the sweatshirt in green.
So, no, but that is that challenge, is that retargeting is great if you're still in the market, but how do you stop it? And it's also creepy, or it's embarrassing if someone else uses that computer and they see that, and let's say it's a present or something there. So clearly, I know there's another panel on native advertising, but real quick, that is an issue that we are hearing more and more. Reason why people are blocking is that the inability for a consumer, a typical consumer, to discern or understand what's advertising versus content. And I don't know if any of you have a quick comment on that to wrap up on.
Yeah, our users don't accept it at all. They think it's deceptive. It's been part of acceptable ads from day one that it has to be clearly labeled as advertising, and it has to be separated from the content. People don't like to be deceived. That's, pretty clear.
I don't know. I think the tough part is a blanket statement that we can't use some of these tactics to target more effectively. It's done every day with direct mail. There's massive databases that are out there that people use to target precisely the right house with the right message. And I don't think that online advertisers should be handicapped from the same techniques that every other advertiser in the world uses.
With that,
Why is there a separate standard for online advertising?
That's a good question to echo throughout the day, I think. And Craig and panel, we have to wrap, but thanks very much for kicking us off.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.